Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou e tēnei rā. Welcome to you all this evening. I'm really delighted that you are all here to support something that is very dear to Colmar Brunton's heart, and obviously a subject that's very dear to your heart as well. It's wonderful that you're here to see the release of our latest Better Futures report that we are releasing in conjunction with Sustainable Business Council. At the end of last year, we spoke to another 1,000 people, which after a decade of researching on sustainability, that's over 16,000 or 16,500 people that we have spoken to. And so this year, I think in particular, we have seen some very interesting progression in the mindset of New Zealanders towards sustainability. So I will be sharing that with you over the course of the next half an hour. Let's just recap a little bit, actually, on what we found in our previous report. And that is that there has been, by the New Zealand public, an increased awareness in the Sustainable Development Goals. We didn't put any focus on that this year, but we will probably get a little check-in on that next year to see if there's been any further increase. We also noticed that there was an increased level of high commitment to sustainability last year, with around 3 in 10 people saying that they were highly committed to living a sustainable lifestyle. And then we identified 3 sort of hot topics that were coming through from our consumer base or from the general public. One was plastic, which we said was the new sugar. One was water and the emphasis on a desire for higher water quality. And the other one was climate change, which although it was ranking lower in the general scheme of things in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, it was still coming through as one of the fastest rising areas of importance from a consumer or a public point of view. Fast forward another year, if we just look at those 3 points. In terms of plastic, this is what's happened in the last year, and this is just looking at social media activity, and we can see that the progression of interest on social media on the topic, which is really the climax being when the government announced a plastic bag ban. And the level of interest that it has gained and the emotional attachment to this topic has been quite extraordinary. In terms of water, there seems to be some really interesting activity around the growth of transparency and, a desire for greater transparency on water quality. Some really fantastic initiatives here, and I think one of the ones that is certainly dear to my heart because I've been involved in the insights behind it, but the Open Gates initiative that Fonterra did. Last year, at the end of last year, over 8,500 New Zealanders took it upon themselves to go and look and see directly at the farms around New Zealand to find out what farmers are doing to enhance water quality in New Zealand, and that has had a big impact on the way they view Fonterra as a business. But the initiatives that the councils have put in place with regards to safe swimming areas and the coastal cleanups and the Riverwatch field trials, they've all been activities that have really sparked and been supported by New Zealanders. The climate change has also, that we're seeing momentum in this area, and the development of the Climate Leaders Coalition, which was a real sort of touchstone point, and we're seeing more and more action. And I was just reading in The Guardian over the weekend the teenagers that in Europe that are missing school to go and protest against the lack of climate action. There is certainly momentum on this, and this is, we feel, is an area to watch, and we'll see proof of that in the report coming up. So that was the year that was. This is the year that is ahead, and this is what New Zealanders are now feeling very strongly about. So, top of the list of number of concerns for New Zealanders at the end of 2018 was plastic waste. This is the most current issue of our time, it seems to be, with 72% saying that they are concerned. And there has been certainly a sort of a complete mindset shift in relation to plastic, and we're very much looking forward to Karen's point of view on how we are dealing with this as businesses as well. But that's not the only thing that New Zealanders are concerned about. It's certainly risen to the top. It was the first read we had on plastic last year. It's risen to the top this year. But there are also other environmental factors, but I think the cost of living is always at the top for New Zealand. And we also see a real concern for our most vulnerable. And as we see our population ageing, the concern for the care of our elderly, and how we can ensure that as we age, that we do so in a dignified and well looked after way, that is something that people are starting to be concerned about. There are 2 new entrants into our top 10 concerns this year. We out of a list of about 40. That is the ageing population, but also the protection of personal data online. And we know with incidents like or issues like Cambridge Analytica and all of data protection is absolutely important to people. So those are the main issues that are coming through, and we will be looking at them, a few of them in more detail. So even though climate change doesn't come up necessarily in the top 10, this is one that has certainly seen some growth over the last 10 years, and we can see that there is greater political cooperation on this particular issue, and that reflects the growing public concern. I do have some empathy for Jacinda Ardern when she said that 10 years ago that she was being sort of laughed at for bringing up issues of climate change, as we were talking about the fact that this sustainability report was something that people didn't really want to know about 10 years ago. But we can see the progress in time of issues coming to the fore for people. And that's the benefit of an ongoing study like this. So how are we responding to some of these challenges that we face? So this is probably one of the most interesting slides or pieces of information for me. That last year I said that 3 in 10 people were highly committed to a sustainable lifestyle, and this year it has leapt a significant number of points to over 4 in 10 people. So we've got people who say that the number of people who are highly committed to a sustainable lifestyle has increased. Those that had no or low commitment to a sustainable lifestyle has decreased. And then we've got, generally those people in the middle are shifting to the top. So it's quite a remarkable piece of information in terms of the cohort of people we're now looking at who have this as a mindset. And we do need to ask ourselves the questions of how are we actually, talking to them, and how are we responding to that need. So this increased commitment has, shown up in 2 touchstone behaviours. The first one is the plastic bag. We are ditching plastic bags, and you can see the value, of government intervention in changing behaviour, but it also shows that population level behaviour is possible if everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet. So just a year ago, we had 3 in 10 people saying that they would reuse plastic bags, and now we have over 8 in 10 people doing that. So it's quite a remarkable change in behaviour. The second touchstone behaviour, and is one to watch, it's off a small base, but plant-based eating is also on the rise. And this is very much in line with international figures that we see coming through on the rise of plant-based diets. So at the moment in New Zealand, 1 in 10 New Zealanders are saying that they are mostly going meat-free. That doesn't mean to say that they're always doing it, but they're certainly trying to bring a greater proportion of plant-based eating into their day-to-day lives. Along with that, we have to look at transport. If we are going to set a path to a low carbon future, we have to be looking at options for that. And for New Zealanders, the electric vehicle is getting a lot of attention. It's not necessarily something that they can shift to. And I guess they're still trying to convince themselves that it is the right way to go. There is a proportion of people who are thinking about switching, but also a larger proportion who are thinking but probably won't, or don't want to. That probably comes down to affordability. We know that cost of living is one of the biggest concerns for New Zealanders, so the idea of going out and buying a brand new electric vehicle isn't really on the agenda. But on the positive side, we do see that they are embracing different ways of being more sustainable when it comes to travel. So these are the sorts of things that New Zealanders say that they are doing in order to be more sustainable with their travel options. And I do note that scootering has come up. Well, to be fair, we did ask it this year as opposed to previous years, but it's nice to see that there are some people really embracing it. Did any of you scooter here today? Fantastic. Andrew, I can count on you to scoot. I do love the joy that comes with the scooting, apart from those pedestrians that get knocked over perhaps. But yeah, it's exciting to see that there are many, many more alternatives being made available to in cities like Auckland and in Christchurch. There's also a very enthusiastic sharing economy mindset, and hands up those who have watched Marie Kondo on Netflix or intend to. Yeah, she's had quite an impact. In fact, I think we heard from the Sustainable Business Council at another meeting a couple of weeks ago that the op shops are overflowing with stuff that people don't want. We can see here that there's a real desire for people to now want to dispose of clothing items through community groups, or especially online community groups. The supply is greater than the demand, and therefore we just need to be careful about what this looks like from a sharing economy point of view. But it is great to see that people are of that mindset that they're wanting to give away and do make things last longer. So what do people expect of business? This is another big question mark. And we did look at the impact of a business being socially and environmentally responsible, the impact that it has on employees. And this was another significant change in the data. Significant increases in the proportion of people who say that it's important for them to work for a company that is socially and environmentally responsible. So this is to convey this as part of what you do as a business is a really fantastic way of attracting talent and retaining talent. And those are really big increases. We also see 9 in 10 people saying that if they heard about a company being irresponsible or unethical, they'd stop buying their products or using their services. Now, this seems like a somewhat inflated type of metric or measure. But I think it represents a mindset, is that actually people want to be doing the right thing, and they do feel as though there is enough choice, that there is potentially choice out there for them to be able to do that. But being a kind business is what, to coin a Jacinda Ardern phrase again, it is something that seems to be coming through. Ethical consumers also believe that they will think again if they see that there are products that are going to have a negative impact on the environment. And there are some interesting quotes there. You'll see we've actually peppered the walls around here with some quotes of a case study that we're doing, but people are very emotionally charged when it comes to talking about these sorts of subjects. So it's worth reading through them just to get a flavour of what people are thinking about. And greenwashing is something that they're very suspicious about. So it's great that we can have Francesca from the Eco Labelling Trust here today to talk about what does greenwashing look like and how can you overcome that. Interestingly, the concept of greenwashing is a real challenge, because what we have seen this year is that there is an increase in the number of people who say that they're more confused about what's being said out there about sustainability. And what that does say to me is that it's actually harder to get your story across in a way that consumers believe, that it feels authentic and credible, and that it has the right evidence. So this is something to be mindful of as we are. There are a number of businesses in this room that all have amazing stories to tell, and I know that many of you have some incredible sustainability initiatives in place, but how we tell that to the public is another story, and it's something that we really need to be mindful of in terms of media. But there are a couple of brands that are cutting through. The confusion comes through in the fact that not many people can name a brand that is a leader in sustainability, but two are coming through as spontaneously mentioned, and one is a brand that we know is born of sustainability, the Eco Store. Interestingly, Fonterra coming through as well as one of the brands that was spontaneously mentioned. Put a lot of energy last year behind trying to tell that story to people, and it has paid off in terms of spontaneous mention when you look at any other spontaneous mentions are less than 1%. But largely, 7 in 10 people are still unable to name a sustainable brand that they consider to be leaders in sustainability. That differs slightly when we prompt them. So we have a list of brands here, and it's difficult to include all brands because there are countless brands who have all, as we say, have got stories to tell. The list is made up of a number of members of the Sustainability Council, so it's good to get a pulse on how you're performing, and these are the ones that have come up on to the fore this year as having a compelling sustainability story. The ones at the top are those that tend to have they've grown out of sustainability. So it would appear that businesses are actually better at telling sustainability stories to their employees than they are necessarily conveying them to the general public. And on the positive side, we see some really good progress in the way that businesses are translating what they're doing to their employees. And ultimately, your employees are your greatest advocates. They should be your greatest advocates. And it's nice to see that, 2/3 of people are saying that they agree that their employer is actively supporting society or that has values that they believe in, and that they would recommend their workplace to others. And this is important because it gives people a greater sense of satisfaction, and again is a great way of attracting talent to business. So I think we can see that from these results, people really want to feel as though they can have a bigger impact, and they know that there are some things that they can take action on. But we do need to understand how we can enable the action behind the desire. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Edward, who is going to talk you through a very small a case study that we decided to run to try and understand what is it, how do we get beneath the skin of the desire and turn that into a change in behaviour. Edward.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, this year we want to do something a little bit different with Better Futures, and as therefore present a case study where we could get into an issue in a bit more depth. We tossed around a number of different issues, so from fast fashion to flexitarian diets to food waste, but we settled on, I guess, the issue of the day, which was plastic waste. As we've already seen that there's been a sea change in terms of use of single-use plastic bags, but we also wanted to explore, actually, could we look at another sort of disposable item that people use? Of course, every day, thousands of workers across the country go out, get their lunch, and that's quite often in a disposable plastic packaging. And then if they're lucky, they're outside eating it. If they're unlucky, they're at their desks. So what we did is we firstly did some qualitative research to really try and get a thorough understanding of what it was that, how people feel about the packaging, and what were some of the challenges in terms of perhaps shifting behaviour and some of the opportunities. And we use video as well to help us get in the moment with customers on this. I should just say this is inspired by a colleague of mine, Mike Dunn, in the Wellington office, who goes out with his reusable container and gets his sushi in that. And so he was the inspiration for today. So as we've kind of seen, there's certainly an emotional resonance when it comes to plastic waste or disposable packaging. There's a strong impact. And with that, if you like, there's a moral imperative to take action. So 8 in 10 believe that we should reduce disposable packaging, that it's the right thing to do. But importantly as well, and this is not always the case with environmental issues, that 8 in 10 actually feel that they can make a difference as well, importantly. However, my colleague Mike is still a bit of an outlier in the nicest possible way for those who have met him. But only 1% of those who buy lunch use reusable containers all the time. So obviously this is, unlike perhaps the reusable coffee cup, this is very much a practice that's in its infancy. So what are some of the barriers then that are preventing us from doing this? So these are things that we identified through the qualitative research, which we then quantified in the Better Futures survey. And I guess the kind of key challenge for us is, of course, our memories. Just actually remembering to take something with you. So, got the keys, wallet, phone, oh yes, reusable container. And also thinking about what I want for lunch before I go out. So it's that kind of thing of spontaneity. You may not have kind of sort of planned ahead for that. We all, I think, have our little routines, kind of stuck in things and kind of, oh, right. But one thing that came through quite strongly in the qualitative research is a kind of an emotional component to this. So it's very much that we don't want to be a nuisance. And we're all quite reserved and polite. And there's that kind of nerves about asking staff, oh, is it okay to kind of sort of do this? Can I ask you to do something that's outside of the norm? And also how we're perceived, not only by staff, but how we're perceived by others around us. So looking odd when we're carrying our piece of Tupperware down Lambton Quay or down Queen Street. And the other thing that we found as well is that quite often a number of food outlets will use packaging as a way of portion sizing, if you like. And so maybe if you brought your own, you'd be judged as a bit greedy. There are, beyond those kind of, I guess, that sort of emotional response, there's a whole number of kind of sort of practical issues that came out as well. So things like, concerns about food hygiene or spills with the packaging, cleaning containers, much more of an issue for men than it was for women. But there you go. Something else that came out when we spoke to managers of food outlets is the use of compostable packaging. Now, some outlets had introduced this in response to actually what their customers were asking for, and a shift away from plastic containers. And obviously, people feel better about that compostable packaging. It just, tactile-wise, it kind of feels right in a sense. But of course, maybe it's not the same solution as having a kind of reusable container, depending on what we do with the kind of sort of waste streams. So what then are some of the ways that we can overcome these barriers? So some of the things that we found from the research, well, firstly, positive reinforcement. Having a sign saying that you're welcome to do this, actually just acknowledging this. Interestingly, I live in Martinborough, and we went sort of plastic-free last year. And if you go into the butcher's, it's Scotty who's the butcher. And Scotty is what I would call quite a gruff New Zealand man. He's no nonsense. He comes out from the back sort of swinging his cleaver and a bit of roadkill or something on the apron. And I'm sure it's all very hygienic, I should add. But funnily enough, there is a sign behind Scotty saying, you're welcome to bring your own container. And that certainly made me feel a bit more reassured, as I don't think I'd like to ask him. But then there's other ways of positive reinforcement, a loyalty stamp, potentially a donation or money off, or simply actually just, the staff acknowledging that and saying thank you for doing that. In addition, feeling like you're making an impact is something that came through, as was easy access to containers. I know down in the Wellington office we have ready access to umbrellas. I'm not sure that's always, an umbrella is not necessarily the most useful thing in Wellington with the wind. But having your kind of sort of bags on hand, why not your containers as well? And also, as well, seeing what others do around us. So interestingly, we're more likely to take notice of our co-workers and what they're doing than what our boss is doing. So no offence, Jason, at the back there.
So look, thank you, Edward, for that. I just wanted to summarise sort of key things from today before I hand over to Abby. So it's very clear that sustainable choices are firmly on the agenda of New Zealanders with 4 in 10. This is a big cohort of people that we can't ignore. So it's important that we've seen the lightning rod of plastic, and we can see what happens when you really do charge people with something as emotional as that, and that they do want to feel as though they can make a difference. So it's important to make something intangible tangible, and climate change is the next one off the block, I believe. In terms of our second takeout, I think it's the fact that businesses really can't ignore this desire, and building a solid reputation around sustainability really starts from the inside. It's about working from the inside out. It's about starting with your employees and making sure that they understand what you're trying to achieve as a business, because they will be your greatest advocates, and they are also the ones that are most likely to implement change and action. And the final thing is, in this age of fake, it's who do you believe, what do you believe, and why should I believe? It's interesting the way that stories develop, and there are real opportunities for a number of different businesses to tell their story, but it's important first to understand who your audience is, why should they need to know that, and what are the barriers and the drivers to actually getting to them and changing their behaviour. And whether it be a small startup who are making water that is in a genuinely reusable plastic, through to the likes of McDonald's who are this went viral, and Simon would be able to tell you what went on behind that. But this is actions that are really meaningful, and where you can draw out an emotional response, it makes a huge difference to people wanting to make change. So we, as a country, have a moral imperative to do everything that we can, and there is an opportunity to do so. And here is a nice quote from the New Zealand Productivity Commission Low Emissions Report that I'll leave you with, and then I will hand over to Abby, who will give us her point of view.